Imagine this. You wake up from a deep sleep, and your whole city has vanished. No neighbors yelling across the street, no cars honking in traffic, just dead silence stretching for miles. What the hell happened last night? This is that morning. The morning the city was gone. The sun came up like it always did. Slow, soft, almost shy. Golden light slid over the rooftops, touched the windows, and warmed the streets. Birds should have been arguing over crumbs. A delivery truck should have been double parked where it didn't belong. Someone should have been late for work already. But the city didn't wake up. It just stayed still. The streets were empty. Not early Sunday empty. Not holiday morning quiet. This was a different kind of silence. The kind that feels like the world forgot to hit the play button. No people, no dogs being dragged along by leashes, no cats watching from windows like tiny judges. Even the air felt unsure of itself. Store doors stood open, frozen mid-decision, although one cafe had chairs still pulled out, like customers had stood up and vanished between sips. A newspaper lay folded on a doorstep, headline unread, ink still fresh. Somewhere, a radio was stuck between stations, humming softly as if it was also confused. In one apartment, breakfast waited on the table, eggs gone cold, toast half buttered, a coffee cup with a lipstick mark, like the last proof someone had been there 5 minutes ago. But they weren't. Clocks told the same story all across the city. Some stopped at 6:17, others at 6:18. A few made it to 6:20 and then gave up like, yeah, this feels wrong. Cars were parked in the middle of streets. One was stopped at a green light. Another had its driver door open, engine off, keys still inside. If you wanted to steal it, this was the easiest day in history. But there was no one left to steal anything. No smoke curled from chimneys, no lights flickered on, no footsteps echoed. The city wasn't abandoned over time. It was instant. That's the part that makes your stomach drop a little. Places usually empty slowly. People leave notes. They pack bags. They argue about what to take and what to leave behind. Even disasters leave mess. Broken glass, fire, noise, panic. This place had none of that. It was like everyone agreed to disappear at the same second without telling anyone else. And the city itself didn't understand what had happened. A bakery oven was still warm. Somewhere, water ran in a sink that no one had turned off. A dog bowl sat full on a kitchen floor. The dog never came back. If you walked through the streets that morning, your footsteps would sound too loud, like you were being rude just by existing. You'd expect someone to shout, "Hey, keep it down." No one did. You could knock on doors. You could call out names. You could wave like an idiot at empty windows. Nothing answered, not even an echo. This wasn't a ghost town. Ghost towns come with stories. Miners move on. Factories close. People leave because they have to. This place didn't leave. It blinked out. And that leads us to the question that still hangs in the air, heavier than the silence. How does an entire city disappear overnight without a single goodbye? No warning signs were found, no emergency calls, no last messages sent at 3 a.m. saying, "Something weird is happening." Phones were left charging. Calendars still had plans for next week. Dentist appointments, birthdays circled in red. A note on one fridge said, "Buy milk." Milk that no one would ever buy. Investigators later said the same thing again and again. There was no sign of struggle, which is a calm way of saying, "This makes no sense." Beds were slept in, some still messy, others perfectly made, like the person was oddly disciplined right before vanishing. Pajamas lay folded, shoes waited by doors. One house had a bathtub filled halfway, water long gone cold. The towel was on the rack, ready to be used. The person never came back to dry off. Another apartment had a birthday cake on the counter, candles already placed. No one blew them out. If this were a movie, you'd expect creepy music right now. But in real life, it was quieter than that. Too quiet. The city sat under the morning sun like a photo that forgot to load the people. Everything else worked just fine. Gravity didn't stop. Time didn't break. Nature kept doing its thing. Only humans were missing. No bodies, no blood, no clues neatly wrapped in a bow. Just absence. Absence can be louder than noise. The strange thing is, nothing looked wrong. The building stood proud. The streets were clean. It could have been a perfect place to live, if anyone was still alive to live there. You might think, okay, maybe they left. Maybe they were evacuated. But evacuated where? And how? And why leave dinner on the stove? People don't evacuate in slippers. You might think, maybe it was a secret experiment. Sure, that's fun, but experiments leave paperwork, and usually someone forgets to erase a sticky note. You might even think aliens, which honestly, at this point, wouldn't be the weirdest guess, because the city gave no explanation. It didn't even try. It just sat there, empty, under the rising sun, holding its breath like it was waiting for someone to come back and say, "Just kidding, we're here." But no one came, and as the hours passed and the sun climbed higher, one truth became impossible to ignore. Whatever happened, happened fast, happened quietly, and happened to everyone. No goodbyes, no final notes, no screams. Just a city that went to sleep full and woke up alone, and this was only the beginning. The last normal night. Before the city vanished, it had a night that was painfully normal. That's what makes this part uncomfortable. The evening before wasn't stormy. No alarms, no strange lights in the sky, no news alerts telling people to panic buy toilet paper. Just a regular night doing regular night things. People cooked dinner, kids complained about homework, someone binge-watched a show they didn't even like anymore. Security cameras would later show it all. Couples walking dogs, teens hanging out on street corners, pretending they weren't bored, a cashier yawning behind a counter, counting minutes until closing. Nothing screamed end of the world. In one neighborhood, a man took out his trash at 9:42 p.m. He waved at his neighbor. The neighbor waved back. That wave would become the last recorded human interaction in the entire city. No one knew it at the time, of course. Bars closed at their usual hour. The bartender wiped down the counter, locked the door, and left the lights on by mistake. That light would still be glowing the next morning, shining onto an empty street, like it was waiting for customers who never showed. Phones pinged with messages. Home safe? See you tomorrow. Don't forget the meeting. Tomorrow never came. Power usage logs show something strange. Around midnight, electricity use dropped, not slowly like people going to sleep. It dropped all at once. Thousands of homes. Same moment, same sudden silence, as if the city exhaled and forgot to inhale again. But here's the thing. Nothing shut off. TVs stayed on. Streetlights stayed lit. Fridges kept humming. The people were the only thing missing. Somewhere around 2 a.m., a baby monitor picked up sound. Not crying, not breathing, just static. A soft hiss that went on for hours until the battery died. That recording still exists. People have listened to it late at night and sworn they heard whispers in the noise. Experts say it's just interference. Experts say a lot of things. Hospitals were left mid-shift. IV bags still dripping into empty beds. A surgery room was prepped and ready. Tools lined up neatly, like the doctor had stepped out for coffee. They never came back. A police station had an open case file on a desk. Coffee spilled beside it, half dried. The officer's chair was pushed back like they stood up fast. But there was no sign of fear. No overturned desks, no smashed windows, no "get out now" written on walls. If something scared them, it didn't scare them enough to run. That's important, because fear leaves fingerprints. This didn't. One of the strangest clues came from voicemail messages. At exactly the same minute, across different carriers, phones stopped receiving new messages. Calls rang forever. No voicemail, no busy tone, but just ringing, like the phones were calling into a void. Weather records showed clear skies that night. No toxic gas, no strange pressure drop, no sound waves powerful enough to knock people out. Nothing natural explained it. Nothing human did either. Neighbors from nearby towns later said they noticed something odd. Around the early morning hours, the city lights seemed brighter. Not flickering, not failing, just brighter than usual, like the place was fully awake while everyone inside was gone. One truck driver passing on the highway said he felt uneasy driving by. He couldn't explain why. Just a heavy feeling, like being watched by a place instead of a person. He didn't stop. No one did. And maybe that's the creepiest part. The world didn't notice right away. Mail trucks arrived the next morning, did their routes, and left packages on porches where no one lived anymore. A bus pulled up to an empty stop. Doors opened, waited, then closed again. Life around the city kept moving, unaware it was circling a hole. It wasn't until noon that someone finally realized something was wrong. A delivery driver couldn't get a signature. Then another. Calls were made. Police from outside the city were sent in. They expected chaos. They found quiet. Too much quiet. The night before had tucked the city in gently. No struggle, no warning, just sleep. And whatever came after that didn't wake them up. As investigators walked through neighborhoods, one question kept repeating in their minds. If nothing went wrong, then why did everyone leave? Or worse, what took them? Because places don't empty themselves, and cities don't just forget their people. Something happened in the dark, something that didn't need noise, something that didn't need force, something that waited until the city felt safe enough to sleep. And whatever it was, it knew exactly when to strike. The search for a cause. By the second day, the silence wasn't mysterious anymore. It was loud. News crews arrived first. They always do. Vans parked crooked on empty streets, cameras rolling, reporters whispering like they were inside a church. One of them joked, "Easiest crowd control ever." Nobody laughed. Bad jokes hit different when no one is around to hear them. Soon after came the experts, scientists, investigators, people with clipboards who really wanted answers. They walked the city block by block, room by room, trying to do what humans always do when faced with something impossible: label it. Gas leak? No signs. Chemical spill? Air was clean. Radiation? Meters stayed quiet. Disease? No bodies. No sick people, just no people. They checked water lines, food supplies, hospitals, schools, Everything normal, too normal. It was like the city had been paused mid-life, waiting for someone to press play again. One scientist described it best when he said, "It's not what we found that's strange. It's what we didn't find. No panic rooms, no mass graves, no shelters packed with supplies. People didn't hide, which means they didn't see it coming. Investigators focused on timing. They always do. If you can't explain what, you try to explain when. And the more they looked, the more uncomfortable it got. Every trace pointed to the same narrow window. Late night, early morning, while most of the city was asleep. Security footage cut out around the same time, not because cameras broke, but because there was nothing left to record. Motion sensors stopped triggering. Smart homes stopped tracking movement. One system logged 0 human motion for 8 straight hours. 0. That's not normal. Even sleeping people move. They roll over, they breathe, they scratch their nose at 3 a.m. like everyone else. The city didn't. It was as if every person vanished between blinks. Then came the theories. Oh, the theories. One group pushed the idea of mass hallucination, that everyone thought the city was full, but it never was. This theory lasted about 5 minutes before someone pointed at school records, birth certificates, tax files, and thousands of photos showing very real people smiling, very real smiles. Another theory said evacuation. Secrets, silent, perfect evacuation. Which sounds impressive until you remember one thing. Humans are terrible at keeping secrets. Someone would have tweeted. Someone would have complained. Someone would have taken a selfie like, "Can't believe we're evacuating at 2 a.m. LOL. Nothing like that existed. Then came the darker guesses. Weapons testing, mind control, something experimental that went very, very wrong. Government officials denied everything, quickly, maybe a little too quickly. But even denial needs evidence, and there was none. No blast marks, no damaged soil, no unusual residue. If this was an experiment, it left no fingerprints. Some investigators focused on the clocks. Remember how many of them stopped? That detail wouldn't let them go. Mechanical clocks, digital clocks, old watches, new phones, all frozen within the same 3-minute window. Not because power failed, but because whatever tracked time stopped mattering. One physicist suggested a local time distortion, a moment where time didn't pass normally, where seconds stretched or collapsed. Another physicist immediately said, "That's ridiculous," which is scientist speak for "I hate that this kind of makes sense." They ran tests. Time flowed normally now, perfectly boring. Whatever happened wasn't happening anymore, and that was a problem. Because you can't study something that already left. Psychologists were brought in next. They didn't look for physical clues. They looked for patterns in life. Who lived here? How did they think? What stressed them out? They hoped to find some shared behavior, some sign of mass decision-making. They found nothing. The city was average, painfully average. Different jobs, different beliefs, different routines. No cult, no shared leader, no event on the calendar that screamed group disappearance day. If anything, that made it worse, because it meant this could happen anywhere. At night, some investigators admitted they felt watched, not by people, but by the city itself, like the buildings remembered what they were supposed to hold. One woman refused to stay overnight again after she heard footsteps above her in an empty hotel.
When they checked the cameras, nothing. Just dust. Animals were another mystery. Pets were gone too. Dogs, cats, birds. Even fish tanks sat empty, filters still running like they hadn't gotten the memo. But insects were still there. Flies, ants, spiders. Whatever happened didn't wipe out life. It selected. That realization made everyone uneasy. Because selection implies choice. By the end of the week, frustration set in. Press conferences turned vague. Phrases like ongoing investigation and unprecedented event got thrown around like comfort blankets. People wanted answers. They didn't get them. Slowly, quietly, the city was sealed off. Barriers went up. Signs warned people to stay away, not because it was dangerous, but because it was unknown. And unknown scares people more than danger ever could. At night, the lights were finally turned off. One by one, streets went dark. The city that once glowed now sat in shadow, like it was trying to forget itself. But some say forgetting doesn't work that way. Some say places remember. And as the search for a cause failed again and again, a new question began to form, one that no one liked asking out loud. What if there was no cause, at least not one we can understand? What if the city didn't break? What if it was taken? Or worse, what if it was invited? Because whatever happened didn't leave chaos behind. It left order. And that might be the most unsettling clue of all. The messages that went nowhere. Once it became clear that science wasn't winning this fight, investigators turned to something more human. Messages. If people vanished, maybe they left something behind without knowing it. A half-sent text, a voice note, a draft email saved by accident. Humans are great at leaving digital crumbs everywhere. And oh boy, there were crumbs. Phones were collected, thousands of them, found on nightstands, couches, car seats. Some were still unlocked. Some were charging, sitting at a very confident 100%. A few had messages typed out. Not sent. One phone had a text that simply said, "Do you hear?" That's it, no punctuation, no follow-up, just a blinking cursor frozen in time. Another had a voice memo recorded at 2:14. Investigators listened to it in a quiet room. At first it sounded like breathing, slow, calm. Then the breathing stopped. No scream, no words, just silence. The memo was exactly 27 seconds long. It ended on its own. Emails told a similar story. Draft folders were full of unfinished thoughts. Something feels off tonight. Can you come over? I don't like this. Am I imagining? None of them were sent. It was like people sensed something, but not enough to panic. That's a strange middle ground. Humans are either calm or afraid. This city lived in the space between. Emergency call logs were checked next. 0 calls during the window. 0. That detail hit hard. People call 911 for everything. Burnt toast, loud neighbors, a raccoon that looked at them funny. And yet, during the most unexplainable event in modern history, silence, which meant either no one had time to react, or no one felt the need to. Some messages came in after the disappearance. Friends texting, family calling, bosses asking why no one showed up to work. The messages piled up. Are you okay? Please answer. This isn't funny anymore. None were read. Read receipts stayed gray. Online statuses never turned green again. Social media accounts froze in place. Last post from the night before showed dinners, pets, selfies in bad lighting. Normal stuff. Painfully normal. One post read, "Can't sleep. City feels weird tonight, lol." It got 3 likes. No comments. Investigators tried something bold, risky, a little desperate. They sent messages into the city. Texts, emails, automated calls. Nothing replied. But something strange happened. Delivery confirmations came back. Messages were marked delivered. Not failed, not bounced. Delivered. To who? No one could answer that. In one test, a phone inside the city rang. Loud, echoing through an empty apartment. It rang until voicemail picked up. And the voicemail greeting played. A human voice. Cheerful, normal. Hey, you've reached. The beep sounded. No one spoke. Listening to that recording made people uncomfortable in a way they couldn't explain, like hearing a ghost without believing in ghosts. Then came the strangest message of all. A scheduled text. One resident had set a message weeks earlier, meant to send on their anniversary. It went out 3 days after the city vanished. It read, "Still you always." That text was delivered from a phone sitting on a nightstand in an empty room. Some investigators wanted to shut the project down after that. Others wanted to dig deeper, like poking something that very clearly didn't want to be poked. They searched for patterns in who tried to send messages and who didn't. Nothing useful. Young, old, single, married, everyone left behind something half-finished. Like the city itself had cut the sentence short. Psychologists suggested a chilling idea. What if people didn't realize anything was wrong until it was already over? What if the moment of disappearance felt normal? No fear, no pain, no warning. Just 1 second here. The next gone. That idea spread fast because it was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it meant no suffering. Terrifying because it meant no escape. As days passed, unanswered messages turned into memorials. Families stopped texting eventually. Friends stopped calling. Hope thinned out like a battery draining to zero. The city's inbox filled with silence. And silence, once it settles in, is hard to get rid of. By now, the world knew something impossible had happened. Theories exploded online. People argued. People joked nervously. People said, "Thank God it wasn't us." But deep down, everyone wondered the same thing. If a city can stop answering, what happens when the rest of the world tries to call? Because the messages didn't fail. They went somewhere. And wherever that was, it wasn't empty. The city that still breathed. A week after everyone vanished, the city should have felt dead. It didn't. It felt awake. Not in a spooky, jump scare way. More like the quiet feeling you get when you wake up before everyone else in the house and you know you're not alone. Electric systems kept running. Water pressure stayed steady. Traffic lights cycled through red, yellow, green, patiently doing their jobs for no one. The city was still breathing. Maintenance crews from outside were sent in to shut things down, save power, prevent fires, keep things safe. Very reasonable, very adult decisions. None of them stayed long. They all said the same thing, just in different words. It feels wrong. One worker joked on his first day, easiest paycheck ever. On his second day, he refused to enter a building alone. On the third, he quit and moved in with his sister. He said the elevators still came when you pressed the button, even when the power should have been cut. Technicians swore lights turned back on after they shut them off. Not all at once, just one here, one there, like the city was correcting them. Official reports blamed wiring issues. Unofficially, people stopped working after sunset. Sound behaved strangely too. Footsteps echoed longer than they should. Doors creaked in buildings with no wind. Once, a team heard laughter down a hallway. They followed it. Nothing. No speakers, no recordings, no prank. Just empty air that had apparently learned how to joke. Animals still avoided the place. Birds wouldn't land. Stray dogs stopped at the edge of the city and refused to cross. One horse threw its rider and bolted the second it saw the skyline. Animals don't care about mysteries. They care about survival. That should have been warning enough. Plants, on the other hand, were thriving. Lawns grew wild. Flowers bloomed in sidewalk cracks. Nature moved in like it had been waiting for humans to leave the room. Some people found that peaceful. Others found it threatening. Because nature doesn't rush unless it's been invited. Thermal scans showed something strange at night. Heat signatures where there shouldn't be any. Hallways glowing faintly warm. Rooms holding heat as if someone had just left. But no bodies were ever found. No shadows on cameras. No movement on sensors. Just warmth. Like memory. One guard swore he saw a light turn on in a house at 3 a.m. He radioed it in, walked over, and watched the light switch flip off by itself. He didn't finish his shift. The city became a place you visited only if you had to. Tours were banned. Curiosity seekers were fined. Drones were used instead of people. Even the drones had issues. Some lost signal in the same areas every time. Others returned with corrupted footage, frames missing, audio warped. One clip showed a playground at sunset. On the final frame, a swing was moving. There was no wind. Engineers said it was probably thermal expansion, metal cooling, very normal. No one believed them. Then came the question no one wanted to ask. What if the city didn't die because it didn't lose anything? What if it gained something? Some theorized the people hadn't vanished at all. They just changed. Folded into the place, spread thin across walls, streets, rooms, not alive the way we understand it, but not gone either. That theory was quickly labeled unhelpful, which is a nice way of saying, please stop saying that. But the feeling remained. At night the city hummed, not machinery, something lower, softer, like a breath held too long. You could feel it in your chest if you stood still. The final straw came when a sensor picked up movement in a residential block. Slow, deliberate, room to room. A response team was sent. They found nothing. But when they checked the log later, the movement pattern matched something familiar. A person. Walking. No running, no panic, just strolling. Like they were home. After that, the city was fully locked down. No more crews, no more night work. Lights were shut off for good, or at least they were supposed to be. Because sometimes, if you drive past on the highway at night, you'll swear you see a window lit. Just one. And then it's gone. The city wasn't empty. It was occupied. Just not by anyone who answered when you called. And if the city could still breathe. The question wasn't where the people went anymore. It was, what did they become? The theories nobody liked. By now, official explanations had run out of oxygen. When facts fail, humans do what we always do, we imagine. Forums exploded. Late-night podcasts had a field day. Everyone suddenly became an expert with a microphone and a strong opinion. Most theories were bad. Like really bad. Time travelers messed up the timeline. Aliens forgot to put the city back. The city was never real to begin with. Fun to think about, not very helpful. But buried under the noise were a few theories that made people uncomfortable because they didn't sound crazy. They sounded possible. The first was called the slip theory. The idea was simple. Reality has layers. Most of the time they line up nicely, but sometimes, very rarely, they don't. And when that happens, things can fall through the cracks. Not explode. Not break. Just slip. Supporters pointed to the clocks, the timing, the clean absence. No struggle, no damage, just a quiet removal like lifting a sticker off glass. Critics said it was science fiction. Supporters replied, so is this city. Another theory focused on consciousness, which is always a red flag because it means no one really knows what they're talking about. This one suggested the city experienced a shared mental event, not a hallucination, but a shift, as if everyone's awareness moved somewhere else at the same moment. Bodies left behind? No, because maybe bodies aren't as solid as we think. That theory was officially described as philosophical nonsense, which again means please stop. Then there was the theory that made officials actively nervous. The invitation theory. It suggested that whatever happened didn't force itself on the city. It was welcomed. Not consciously, not with meetings and votes, but quietly, passively, like how you fall asleep. You don't decide to, you just let go. Supporters pointed out the lack of fear, the lack of resistance, the fact that people were mid-routine, mid-life. The city didn't fight. It accepted. Accepted what exactly, no one could say. That part mattered less than the idea itself. Because if something could be accepted once, it could be accepted again. A smaller group focused on patterns around the city itself, its layout, its age, its history, built over older land, older paths, old names erased and replaced. They found stories, legends, folklore about places where people walked into the ground or joined the quiet. Those stories had always been laughed at. Until now. The city's name even translated loosely from an old dialect into something chilling. Where voices settle. Officials said that was a coincidence. Coincidences were running low. Another theory tried to bring it back to nature, not nature like trees and animals, nature like systems. The city had grown fast, too fast, always connected, always awake, lights on all night, noise everywhere. Maybe the city reached a breaking point. Not a collapse. A reset. Like a computer restarting when it overheats. Except this reset didn't ask permission. That theory ended with one scary sentence. Maybe the city didn't disappear. Maybe it logged out. People hated that one. Because logging out suggests you can log back in. And what if something else does first? By this point, officials stopped commenting on theories altogether. They stuck to safe words like ongoing and unresolved. The city faded from headlines, replaced by new disasters, new scandals, new things to argue about online. But late at night, when things were quiet, people still thought about it, especially those who lived nearby. They noticed small things. Dreams about empty streets. The sound of footsteps that weren't there. Phones lighting up for no reason at 3 a.m. Probably stress. Probably coincidence. Probably. Theories didn't give answers. They gave questions. And the worst question of all was this. If this was an accident, why hasn't it happened again? And if it was, who's next? Because somewhere out there, cities are falling asleep every night. Lights going out. People lying down. Minds letting go. And no one knows what's listening when they do. The people who tried to stay. After the city was sealed, most people did the sensible thing. They stayed away. But not everyone. There's always a certain type of person who hears, do not enter, and thinks, okay, but what if I just look? Curiosity is powerful. Sometimes stronger than fear, sometimes stronger than common sense. These were the people who tried to stay. Not tourists, not thrill seekers with selfie sticks. These were researchers, guards, volunteers, and a few locals who refused to leave the edge of the place that used to be their home. They said they needed closure. They said they needed answers. Some said they just needed to feel close to the people they lost. Temporary stations were set up just outside the city limits. Tents, trailers, portable lights, everything very official, very controlled. No one was supposed to cross the line after dark. Guess when people crossed the line? Yeah, after dark. The first incident was small, almost embarrassing. A night guard reported hearing music. Soft, distant, like someone playing a radio too low to be annoying. Old music, the kind that sounds warm and scratchy even when it's digital. They checked the area. No speakers. No power. No source. The report was filed as audio hallucination due to fatigue, which is a long way of saying, go get some sleep. Then a researcher claimed she smelled food. Not trash. Not rot. Food. Fresh bread, something sweet, something familiar. She started crying before she realized it, because the smell reminded her of home. She was sent home the next morning. A few days later, motion sensors tripped inside the city again. Same pattern as before, slow movement, human pace. A small team was sent in during daylight. They found footprints. Human footprints. Fresh. But here's the thing. They didn't lead into the city. They led out. From a residential block toward the edge. Toward where the team was standing. The prints stopped a few feet from the barrier. Like whoever made them realized they weren't supposed to cross. Or didn't want to. That discovery was never released to the public. But people talk. And once a story like that starts moving, it doesn't stop. Soon, others began reporting things. Someone heard their name whispered while checking equipment. Someone saw a figure in a window that vanished when they looked twice. Someone swore they recognized a silhouette walking past a doorway. Always just for a second. Always just long enough to make your heart jump. Sleep became a problem. People stationed near the city reported vivid dreams, not nightmares, not exactly. Dreams where the city was full again. Lights on. People laughing. Life happening. And the dreamer was the only one who didn't belong. They'd try to talk, no one would answer. They'd try to leave. And wake up right before they could. One man, a long-time security contractor, stayed longer than anyone else. He said the city didn't scare him. War zones hadn't scared him. Empty buildings weren't going to either. He lasted 3 weeks. On the 22nd night, he radioed in something strange. "I think they're waiting," he said. "Who's waiting?" the operator asked. There was a pause. Everyone. That was his last transmission. They found his station empty the next morning. Coffee still warm, chair pulled out, boots gone. No sign of struggle. No note. Just another absence added to the list. After that, rules got stricter. No overnight shifts, no solo work, no excuses. And still people slipped through. Some were drawn by grief, some by obsession, some by the quiet idea that maybe, just maybe, the city was still holding something worth finding. A few claimed they felt calmer inside the limits, less anxious, less heavy, like the noise of the world faded the deeper you went. That scared psychologists more than the sightings. Because calm is persuasive. Calm makes you stay. One volunteer described it like this. "It feels like the city remembers how to take care of you." That sentence ended the program. Anyone who had spent extended time near the city was pulled out and evaluated. Some protested. Some begged to go back. One woman said leaving felt like losing her family all over again. None of them were allowed back. Officially, the city was now considered non-interactive. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. The city was interacting just fine. It just wasn't doing it on our terms. Years passed, the fence rusted, signs faded, nature crept closer, the world moved on mostly. But every now and then, someone new would appear at the edge. Someone who didn't know the full story. Someone who heard a voice. Or saw a light. or dreamed a dream that felt too real to ignore. And they'd stand there, staring at empty streets, with a strange feeling that the city was staring back. Waiting. Because once you notice it, once you feel that pull, the hardest part isn't staying out. It's choosing not to go home. When the city answered, for years the city stayed quiet. Not empty quiet, not peaceful quiet. Listening quiet. People stopped expecting answers. The story faded into documentaries, late-night threads, and that one friend who always brought it up at 2 a.m. like, okay, but seriously, what do you think happened? Then one night, the city answered. It started small, like all bad ideas do. A monitoring station picked up a signal, not radio, not phone, something in between. A repeating pulse coming from deep inside the city, cycling every 90 seconds. At first, they thought it was a machine left running. Then someone overlaid the pattern with old data. It matched a heartbeat. Not perfectly, but close enough to make the room go quiet. The signal wasn't strong, barely there, like it didn't want to be noticed, or like it was just testing the line. Technicians argued for hours. False positive, electrical noise, glitch in the system. Then the signal changed. It sped up. Just a little. Like something reacting. Someone made the mistake of responding. A simple ping, a harmless test signal sent toward the source, the digital version of knocking on a door and hoping no one answers. The city knocked back. The pulse synced with the response, perfectly, like it had been waiting for the rhythm. That's when people stopped smiling. More tests followed, carefully, cautiously. Each time the city adjusted, not randomly, intentionally. A slow signal got a slow reply. A fast one got faster. It wasn't just noise. It was conversation. They shut everything down. Power to the station, backup systems, emergency failsafes. The official report later said the signal ceased. That was true. Mostly. Because 3 nights later, something else happened. Lights turned on. Not all of them, just a few windows, scattered, random looking, except when someone mapped them. They formed a pattern. Street by street, block by block. Spelling something. It took hours to notice, longer to believe. The word was simple. Here. No one claimed responsibility for releasing that image. Officials said it was a hoax. They said the city had no power. They said a lot of things. Meanwhile, people nearby reported their phones vibrating with no notifications, smart speakers turning on and off, clocks resetting themselves to the same time. 6:18 a.m. Always 6:18. The time the city stopped. Then came the audio. Recording devices left near the border captured sound, not clear words, more like echoes layered over each other, hundreds of voices speaking softly out of sync. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they sounded like a crowd. Not screaming. Talking. Living. One analyst described it as a room full of people speaking just below a whisper. That analyst quit the next day. The final message came through an old system, something no one had thought to disconnect, a digital billboard on the highway leading past the city. It flickered to life at 2:17 a.m. Just text, white on black. We did not leave. Traffic cameras caught cars slowing down, drivers stirring. One driver pulled over and sat there for 20 minutes, engine running, eyes locked on the sign. When the sign went dark, he drove straight into the city. They found his car, abandoned near the center the next morning. Door open. Engine cold. No sign of him. After that, the city was officially declared off-limits forever, not temporarily, not under review. Forever. The public was told it was unsafe. They weren't told why. Behind closed doors, one question dominated every conversation. If the city could answer, what was it answering from? Because the messages didn't sound angry. They didn't sound trapped. They sounded calm, comfortable, like someone calling from home. And maybe that's what scared people the most. Because if the city was still there, still thinking, still responding, then maybe the people were too. Just not in a way we could reach or leave. And if the city learned how to speak, what else could it learn? The rule that was never written. After the city answered, something changed. Not in the city. In us. People stopped asking what happened and started asking a much scarier question. What are we allowed to do next? Because once something talks back, it's no longer a mystery. It's a boundary. New rules appeared overnight, not laws exactly, more like shared instincts, unspoken agreements, the kind people follow without needing to be told. Don't drive past the city at night. Don't respond to strange signals. Don't joke about going inside. Especially that last one. The highway signs were updated, not with threats, just simple directions rerouted far away. The city slowly disappeared from maps, digital first, then paper, like it was being politely erased. Teachers stopped mentioning it. News outlets avoided it. Online posts got buried, flagged, or quietly vanished. Not deleted, just hard to find. The city became one of those topics people lowered their voice to talk about. Which is funny, because it had already learned how to speak. People living nearby noticed subtle things. Power outages that skipped their houses but hit everything facing the city. Radio stations picking up faint echoes of voices late at night. Smart TVs waking up on their own, paused on empty streets filmed years ago. Always the same angles. Always the same quiet. Some people claim the city appeared in their dreams again, but the dreams were different now. In these, the city wasn't empty. It was full. Lights on, windows open, people inside going about their lives, laughing, cooking, talking. And they looked fine. Happy even. The dreamer was always outside. Knocking. Calling. Waving. No one noticed. Except sometimes, just sometimes, someone would turn and smile. Not inviting. Not warning. Just smiling like, oh, you're still there. Psychologists noticed a pattern. People who dreamed of the city felt disconnected afterward. Not sad, not scared. Detached. They stopped arguing, stopped rushing, stopped caring about things that used to bother them. Some described it as peace. Others described it as numbness. A few packed up and moved closer to the exclusion zone for cheaper rent or fresh air. They didn't say the real reason. They liked being near it. That terrified officials more than any signal ever did. Because liking something means consent. And consent opens doors. Quietly, a new task force formed. No flashy name, no press releases, just a small group with one job. Make sure the city is never invited again. They studied human behavior instead of physics, language instead of signals, belief instead of data. Their conclusion was unsettlingly simple. The city didn't need force. It needed attention. Every signal sent. Every drone flown. Every theory shared. It all counted. Like tapping glass. Like knocking. The task force pushed a strategy of forgetting. Let the city starve. Let it fade. No responses, no curiosity, no late-night wondering out loud. Silence as defense. It almost worked. Until a kid broke the rule. He was 16, bored, smart enough to be dangerous. Found old footage, old signal logs, old tech everyone forgot about. He didn't mean harm. He just wanted to see if it was still there. He sent a message, not words, just a simple pulse, a digital hello. The city answered immediately. Not with lights, not with sound, with direction. Every navigation app in a 10-mile radius updated at the same time. One destination highlighted. The city center. Estimated arrival time, now. The kid never went missing, not officially. He just stopped responding. His room stayed neat. His phone stayed on his desk. His parents said it felt like he'd stepped out for a moment and forgotten to come back. After that, the task force disbanded. Not because they failed, because they realized something worse. The rule had always existed. They just noticed it too late. Don't answer. Don't invite. Don't listen too closely. Because the city doesn't chase. It waits. And waiting is easy when you've already learned that humans can't stand silence forever. Somewhere the city is still there, streets intact, homes ready, lights that know when to turn on. It doesn't call anymore. It doesn't have to. Because every night, somewhere in the world, someone lies awake, thinking about empty streets and quiet mornings and a place where everything finally stopped hurting. And the moment they think, what if I went there? The city listens. The day we stopped looking back. At some point, the world decided to move on. Not officially. There was no announcement, no press conference where someone cleared their throat and said, "All right, everyone, mystery over, stop caring." It just happened. New problems showed up, loud ones, messy ones, the kind that demand attention right now. And compared to those, a quiet city that wasn't asking for anything felt easy to ignore. Out of sight. Out of mind. That's how humans survive. The exclusion zone stayed in place, but enforcement got lazy. Cameras broke and weren't replaced. Signs faded until they looked more like suggestions than warnings. New people moved into nearby towns and asked innocent questions like, "What's over there?" The answers got shorter every year. "Oh, that place. Old city. Nothing important." Which was technically true. Nothing important anymore. The city stopped making noise. No signals, no lights, no messages spelling creepy words. It behaved itself like it had learned something. Like it had learned patience. Researchers noticed something odd during this quiet phase. Reports of dreams about the city dropped. Sightings stopped. Even the strange tech glitches became rare. The city was doing what everyone else was doing. Letting go. And that should have been a relief. But it was. Because when something dangerous goes quiet, you don't relax. You worry about what it's planning. Years passed, trees grew through sidewalks, roofs collapsed. Nature finally started winning the slow, boring way it usually does. From satellite images, the city looked less like a mystery and more like a ruin. A solved problem. A chapter closed. Students studied it in classes now, not as a threat, as a case study, the unexplained urban disappearance. Multiple choice questions, safe answers. No one talked about feelings. No one talked about the pull. Then one day, a demolition request was filed. Just paperwork at first. A proposal, careful wording, clear language. The city was unsafe, decaying, expensive to maintain. Better to erase it completely. Wipe the slate clean. Build something new. The vote passed quietly. Too quietly. Old residents protested, but their voices were tired. They'd been carrying grief for years. Some of them admitted something they hadn't before. They didn't want the city destroyed. They wanted it preserved. Not as a memorial. As a place. That scared people more than anger ever could. Still, machines rolled in. Heavy ones. The kind that don't care about history or mystery. The kind that break things for a living. The first day went fine. Debris cleared, streets cracked, buildings came down with loud, dusty crashes that echoed through the valley. The noise felt almost disrespectful after all those years of silence. Nothing happened. The second day went fine too. Then came the third. At 6:18 a.m., every machine shut off at once. Not broke, not stalled. Off. Operators checked fuel, controls, wiring, everything was fine. The machines just refused. Engines wouldn't turn, screens wouldn't light, even handheld tools went dead. Someone joked, "Guess it doesn't want to be demolished." No one laughed. Power crews brought in generators, fresh ones, independent systems, no connection to the grid. They failed too. Phones stopped working inside the city limits. GPS froze. Radios filled with static that sounded uncomfortably like breathing. The city wasn't quiet anymore. It was firm. That night, lights came on again. Not spelling words, not sending messages. Just normal lights. Homes, streets, stores. The city looked alive. Healthier than it had in years. And then something new happened. Movement. Cameras caught figures, clear this time, walking normally, opening doors, standing in windows. They looked like people, but no one recognized them. Not neighbors, not family, not anyone on record. New faces, calm faces. The demolition order was revoked by morning. Officially, it was due to technical complications. Unofficially, people were scared. Because the city hadn't just resisted being erased. It had improved. Like it had been waiting for a reason to wake up fully. Experts warned against engagement, same rule as always. Don't respond. Don't interfere. Don't invite. But curiosity had been building for years. Pressure doesn't disappear, it just waits for a crack. Someone crossed the line again. Not a kid this time. A planner. An adult, educated, confident, the kind of person who believes problems exist to be solved. She walked into the city in daylight, on camera, with permission forms signed and a calm expression on her face. She said she wanted to understand. She didn't run. She didn't panic. She smiled. The cameras followed her until she turned a corner. They never picked her up again. But the next morning the city looked complete. Broken buildings stood straight, streets were clean, grass pulled back from the roads like it had never been there. The city was restored. Not rebuilt. Restored. Satellite images confirmed it, historical damage reversed, decay undone, as if time had politely stepped aside. The city was back. Empty of us. Full of something else. Officials finally did what they should have done years ago. They stopped pretending. The city wasn't a problem. It was a choice. A place where people didn't vanish. They stayed. Just not as themselves. And that left the world with one final, uncomfortable understanding. We didn't stop looking back because the mystery was solved. We stopped because the answer was waiting. Patient, ready, and one day, when the noise of the world gets too loud, when the lights stay on too late, when silence starts to sound like comfort, the city will still be there. Not calling, not chasing, just offering. And the scariest part, it only takes one yes. The ones who went willingly. There's a big difference between disappearing and leaving. Once the city was restored, people started noticing something strange in the data. Not headlines, not official reports. The quiet stuff no one checks unless they're already uneasy. Missing persons cases. Not huge numbers, not enough to cause panic, just a steady trickle. One here, One there, adults mostly, no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no dramatic last moments. They didn't vanish overnight. They drifted. Each case shared small details that were easy to ignore if you wanted to. Phones left behind, fully charged. Homes tidy, like someone expected to return. No signs of fear. And here's the part no one likes saying out loud. They didn't look like victims. They looked decided. One woman told her sister she was going somewhere quiet for a while. Another man sold his car, paid his bills early, and deleted social media without drama. A college student emailed a professor saying, "I think I found where I belong." That email was never explained. When investigators traced the last known movements, a pattern formed. Highways, side roads, walking paths, all bending gently toward the same place. The city. Not rushing. Not sneaking. Heading there like it was an appointment. Surveillance footage caught some of them at the border, pausing, breathing, looking relieved like travelers finally arriving after a long delay. One man laughed to himself before stepping past the line. Another whispered, "I knew it." None of them ran. None of them hesitated. And no one ever came back. Officials tried to spin it: stress, depression, group suggestion, online myths influencing vulnerable people, all the usual words that make things feel controlled. But families pushed back. These people weren't lost, they said. They weren't desperate. They were calm. Calm became the key word. Psychologists hate calm in situations like this. Panic is easy to explain. Calm suggests certainty. Certainty suggests information. So the question became, what did they know? Some of the people who left had no connection to the city, no family history, no childhood memories. They shouldn't have cared. But they did. Interviews with friends revealed the same sentence over and over, phrased slightly differently each time. "I just feel drawn to it. It makes sense to me. I can't explain it, but it feels right." That last one showed up a lot. Feels right. As if the city wasn't taking people. It was answering them. Online, a new kind of community formed. Small, careful, not flashy. People who talked about the city without fear or jokes. They didn't call it dangerous. They called it honest. One post read, "The world is loud, the city is, that's the difference." Another said, "Everyone thinks it steals you. What if it just stops lying to you?" Those posts were deleted quickly. Screenshots spread anyway. Then came the recordings. Not signals, not lights, voices. People living near the exclusion zone began recording audio at night. Most of it was wind, bugs, distant cars. But sometimes there were words. Not clear sentences, not commands. More like reminders. Rest. Enough. Here. Short, soft, almost kind. Skeptics said it was pareidolia, the brain finding patterns in noise. Same reason people hear words in songs played backward. That explanation worked. Until different recordings captured the same words. Same timing. Same tone. Same calm. One former investigator finally said what others were thinking. It's not calling everyone, it's calling specific people. People who were tired. People who felt out of place. People who felt like the world was asking too much for too long. The city wasn't random. It was selective. And that made it personal. Governments tried awareness campaigns, mental health resources, warnings dressed up as concern. If you feel drawn to restricted areas, talk to someone. But how do you warn people away from peace? How do you argue with something that never promises anything and still delivers calm? The city didn't offer happiness. It offered relief. That's more dangerous. One leaked report suggested the city functioned like a filter, a place where identity thinned out, where sharp edges softened, where being someone slowly became being enough. No jobs, no deadlines, no expectations, just presence. That report disappeared. But the idea didn't. Some families started holding stay dinners. No phones, no news, just talking, laughing louder than usual, like noise itself was protection. Others did the opposite. They stopped fighting it. They wrote letters to their missing loved ones, left them at the border, apologized for trying to pull them back. One note read, "If you're safe, you don't have to come home." That note was gone the next morning, taken by wind, or something else. The city never confirmed anything. It didn't need to. It didn't chase people. It didn't advertise. It waited. And those who went willingly never described fear, never described pain, only quiet. Which brings us to the hardest truth of all. The city doesn't feel like an ending to the people who enter it. It feels like an answer. And once someone believes they've found the answer, no warning sign in the world is loud enough to stop them from listening. The choice no one admits to making. By the time the city had a name again, spoken softly, carefully, it was already too late to pretend this was just a mystery. People weren't being taken. They were choosing. Not in a dramatic movie scene way. No speeches, no goodbyes with swelling music, just small decisions stacking up quietly like dishes in a sink. One night you can't sleep. One morning you feel tired for no clear reason. One day the noise of everything feels heavier than it should. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought appears that doesn't feel like a thought at all. There's another option. No one tells you where it came from. That's the trick. People who eventually went to the city almost always describe the same moment. A pause, a stillness, like standing in a doorway and realizing you don't actually want to go back into the room behind you. It didn't feel forced. It felt obvious. Researchers tried to map the psychology of it. Burnout, grief, disconnection, modern exhaustion, all the usual suspects lined up neatly. But there were exceptions. People with good lives. People with families they loved. People with plans. They felt it too. Which ruined the neat explanation. The city didn't target broken people. It offered itself to anyone who noticed it. That's a very different thing. Quiet surveys, never published, found something unsettling. People who knew about the city and believed the stories reported lower stress when they thought about it. Not hope. Relief. Just knowing there was a place where the noise stopped made the noise easier to carry. Like knowing you could leave, even if you didn't. Philosophers got involved, which is usually how you know things have gone off the rails. They argued that the city wasn't a trap, it was a mirror. It reflected how much people were willing to let go of. Identity, ambition, constant becoming. One philosopher wrote, "Freedom isn't always about having more choices. Sometimes it's about having fewer." That paper caused problems. Because if the city represented fewer choices, then staying away was the louder decision. Families of those who left struggled with a new kind of grief, not anger, not confusion. Betrayal. How could they choose that over us? How could quiet be more important than love? But love is loud too, demanding, always asking you to be something. The city didn't ask. That hurt more. Some people started visiting the border like it was a park, sitting, reading, just being near it. They said it helped them think, helped them breathe. Officials tolerated it at first. Then they noticed something. People who spent time near the city started changing. Not dramatically, subtly. They spoke slower, reacted less, smiled in a way that didn't reach for approval. They became still. Productivity dropped, ambition faded, the world noticed, and the world didn't like that. Because systems need people who want more. The city offered people who wanted less. That's a thread. A proposal surfaced, never officially acknowledged. The idea was simple and horrifying. Relocate the city. Not physically, conceptually. Erase it from culture completely. No mentions, no documentaries, no whispered names. Make it fade out of shared memory. If attention fed it, starvation might weaken it. The plan failed immediately. You can't unknow something, especially not something that feels like relief. People stopped arguing about whether the city was good or bad. That question felt childish now. The real question became, what does it say about our world that so many people would rather disappear quietly than stay? That question hit harder than any theory. Because if the city was an answer, then it was answering something real. Something broken. Late one night, a journalist, burned out, overworked, cynical, sat near the border recording notes. He didn't plan to cross. He just wanted to feel close to the story one last time. He wrote one final line before his recorder cut out. I don't think the city is dangerous. I think it's honest, and I'm not sure we are. He never published that piece. But someone found the recorder later, left neatly on a bench, pointing toward the city. The city doesn't make choices for people. That's the lie everyone wants to believe. It just creates a moment of quiet long enough for people to hear their own. And once someone hears that voice clearly, the hardest part isn't going in. It's pretending you didn't hear it. The silence that followed. After enough people chose the city, something unexpected happened. The noise outside got louder. Not actual sound, news, traffic, alarms, but pressure. The world seemed to push harder, like it was offended by the idea that silence could be an option. Work hours stretched, screens stayed on later, everything needed attention now. The pace increased like the world was trying to prove a point. You don't need quiet, you need distraction. But it didn't work, because the city had already introduced a dangerous idea. That leaving didn't have to look like running, and staying didn't have to mean surviving. People who didn't go to the city still changed. Even those who swore they'd never set foot near it felt something shift inside them. They stopped rushing to fill silence. They sat with questions longer. They said no more often. And institutions noticed. When people stop chasing, systems wobble. Productivity experts complained about motivation decline. Employers talked about engagement issues. Governments used softer words, but the message was the same. People were slipping. Not into the city. Out of the race. And that scared everyone. The city itself went quiet again. No lights, no signals, no messages, no figures in windows. Satellite images showed nothing but stillness. It was like it had done what it came to do. Left a thought behind. Researchers waited for another response, another sign, another moment they could point to and say there, that's it. Nothing came. Months passed. Then years. The city became something worse than a threat. It became an idea. Parents warned kids about it without explaining why. Artists referenced it without naming it. Writers circled it in metaphors they pretended were about something else. A place where the noise stops. A place that doesn't ask. Everyone knew what it meant. Nobody said it out loud. A study, quietly funded, quietly buried, found something strange. People who knew about the city but never visited it still showed long-term changes. Lower anxiety. Lower ambition. Lower fear of missing out. higher contentment. That last result caused arguments, because contentment is bad for growth. The city wasn't spreading physically. It was spreading mentally. And there's no fence for that. The exclusion zone stayed, but fewer guards were needed. People didn't try to break in anymore. Not because the pull was gone, but because the idea had already done its work. You don't need to go somewhere to stop believing in the race. Some nights people reported dreams again, but these dreams were different. The city was distant, quiet hole. No invitations. No smiles. No waiting figures. Just a place that existed. And the dreamer wasn't outside knocking anymore. They were walking away. Calm. At peace. That scared the experts the most. Because the city didn't need followers. It needed examples. The final report written about the city ended with a sentence no one wanted to quote. The danger was never the disappearance. It was the possibility that nothing was wrong with it. That report was archived. The city remained. Unmarked. Unmoving. Unbothered. And the world slowly adjusted around the gap it left. Not healed. Just quieter. Because once you know silence is possible, you can't unhear it. And even if you never go to the city, even if you never see its streets or lights or empty homes, a part of you will always remember. There was a place where everything stopped asking. And one day, when the world feels too heavy, you might not go looking for it, but you'll understand why others did. And that understanding, that quiet nod of recognition, is how the city keeps spreading, without moving at all. The last question. Years later, people stopped asking what the city was. That question had worn itself out. The new question was quieter, smaller, harder to admit. Why didn't it take everyone? Because if the city was so calm, so gentle, so convincing, why were so many people still here? Sociologists argued it was responsibility, family, love, fear, all solid answers, all incomplete. Because plenty of people with responsibilities went. Plenty of people in love went. Plenty of brave people stayed. The difference wasn't strength. It was attachment. People who stayed described something specific when asked privately, not in interviews, not on record, in late conversations when voices drop and honesty sneaks in. They said they felt the pull. Everyone did. But they also felt something else. Resistance. Not fear, not logic. Weight. Like invisible threads tied them to the world, messy threads, complicated ones, the kind that tangle and scratch and hurt sometimes. The city offered release. The world offered friction. And friction, as uncomfortable as it is, reminds you that you're still here. One man explained it best. He lived close enough to see the city lights on clear nights. He never crossed the line. I wanted to go, he said, but I wanted to stay wanting things more. That sentence confused a lot of people. But it stuck. People who didn't go weren't immune. They weren't stronger. They were just unfinished, still mid-sentence. The city felt like a period at the end of a long paragraph. Some people weren't ready to stop talking. There was a theory, never published, never approved, that the city only accepted people who were done becoming. Not broken. Not lost. Done. People who didn't feel the need to explain themselves anymore. People who didn't need witnesses. That theory scared everyone. Because becoming tired of becoming is something that can happen to anyone. One night, a former researcher returned to the border alone. No equipment, no cameras, just a notebook and a pen that barely worked. He didn't plan to cross. He just wanted to ask something. Out loud. He stood there, looking at the quiet streets and said, "What do you want?" The city didn't answer. Not with lights. Not with sound. But the question came back in his own head. What do you want? That's the problem with silence. It reflects. He stood there for a long time, thinking about deadlines, regrets, old arguments, small joys, bad habits, good intentions. He thought about the relief the city promised. And then he thought about the mess of staying. The noise. The effort. The constant trying. And something surprised him. He realized he wasn't done. Not happy. Not successful. Just unfinished. He wrote one last note in his notebook before leaving. The city doesn't take people. It waits for people to stop holding on. That notebook was found years later in an archive. No one knew why it had been saved. Maybe because it sounded like a warning. Or maybe because it sounded like permission. Over time, fewer people went to the city, not because the pull faded, but because people learned to live with it. Like background noise. Like a scar you stop touching. The city didn't disappear. It stabilized. A constant. And constants have a strange effect on humans. They force comparison. Every hard day, every overwhelming moment, the city became an unspoken option. I could stop. Not die. Not fail. Stop. And choosing not to became a daily act. Quiet. Private. Brave in a way no one applauds. Parents chose bedtime stories over silence. Artists chose unfinished work over peace. Friends chose arguments over absence. Mess over stillness. Because stillness, they learned, is beautiful. But beauty isn't the same as living. The city never judged those who stayed. It didn't judge those who went either. That was the final truth people struggled with. The city had no opinion. It wasn't evil. It wasn't kind. It was available. And availability is dangerous. One philosopher summarized it in a single line that circulated quietly online before vanishing. The city is what happens when rest becomes a destination instead of a moment. No one built statues about the city. No memorials. No museums. Just fences, fatting signs, and long glances from passing cars. At night, when the highway is empty and the radio cuts to static for a second, drivers sometimes feel it again. That soft thought. I could stop. Most of them keep driving. Some slow down. A few pull over just to breathe. The city doesn't move. It doesn't call. It doesn't need to. Because the last question it leaves everyone with isn't about where the people went. It's this. How long do you want to keep going? There's no right answer. Only the one you choose. Every day. The morning you might see. If you ever drive past the city, don't expect drama. No lights flicker. No whispers drift across the wind. No figures appear in windows waving or smiling. It looks like any other abandoned place. Quiet streets, cracked sidewalks, overgrown parks, rusted cars. But the truth is, it isn't abandoned. Not really. The city waits. It waits the same way a cat waits on a windowsill. Patient, unhurried, watching, knowing, understanding more than it shows. It doesn't need to move. It doesn't need to call. It just exists full and complete while the world rushes past. Sometimes early in the morning, someone reports seeing something strange. A shadow that seems too deliberate. A window that wasn't dark before. A swing moving, even when there's no wind. They tell their friends. They tell strangers online. They make videos. Then the videos disappear, accounts vanish, posts are buried, memories fade, not by force, by the soft gravity of disbelief. The kind of forgetting that feels normal, even comforting. The city doesn't mind, because it doesn't need witnesses. It only needs the possibility. The possibility that someone could choose to notice, to step inside. And when someone does, it's never the same. People who enter rarely speak of the city afterward, not because they're afraid, not because they're silenced, because nothing they can say will capture it. No words, no photos, no stories. You can describe a street, a house, a park, but you cannot describe the weight of a place that doesn't need you to exist. It doesn't matter if you stay outside or if you're far away. The city is still part of you once you know it's real. Some mornings drivers see smoke rising gently from chimneys. No one lives there. No one is cooking, but it looks right, natural, warm. The clocks in the buildings don't tick, but the city still keeps time. You just can't measure it with your wristwatch. And sometimes it feels like the city remembers the people who left, the ones who went willingly. The streets might be empty, but the memory of life lingers. A scent of bread, the faint hum of conversation, a feeling of being watched, not threatened, just noticed. And that's the secret. The city doesn't vanish people. It doesn't chase them. It waits, waiting for mornings when someone might see it, really see it, and maybe understand it. So if you ever find yourself driving past an empty city at sunrise, notice this. The streets are still there. The buildings still stand. The city still breathes. You don't need to go inside. You don't need to answer. But the moment you notice, the city knows. And that's enough. Because some places never really vanish. Not overnight. Not ever. They just wait.